Sponsored by Chartered Financial Strategies. You are now watching Tax Bites.
Okay, now we're going to talk about the first one thing. I go through a couple of phases that this economic effort has gone through to address the coronavirus issues. The first one was I think when the president signed a national disaster, so to speak, and said, okay, states can seek out funding to combat or deal with their issues with regards to coronavirus in their state and so forth. I don't know the qualifications for all that. I don't know who all is available to that. My guess is it's going to be prioritized by how much cases and so forth and impacting your particular state, county, whatever. The point I'm making is that was an initial phase one. Kind of around that, maybe not an official phase one. The IRS extended filings of tax returns to July 31st, July 15th, I mean, along with payment of taxes to July 15th. That's business, it's individual, like business like corporations and partnerships, that is personal returns, that is, I think, gift tax returns were also added into that. So it's payment of tax for 2019. That's also payment of the first quarter um, for self-employment. Your first quarterly payment is due on April 15th. They're moving it to July 15th. But it does not seem to address, obviously payroll returns. I don't know. You're going to have to check with your state to see what your state does. In the state of Texas, we're not seeing a great amount of relief being addressed, but we don't have income taxes here per se. So that will be a little bit case by case and agency by agency. There can be different agencies that address those relief efforts for filing and payment of taxes. So that's, again, this is federal, not state, and that's a watch out if you're in a state that has other, or you have other filing needs beyond just the normal federal. They also went into the IRS collection efforts. I had an episode of that where IRS collection enforcement is largely been impacted. I don't want to go in great detail on that. I've got an episode on that you can refer to, and it's kind of ever changing a little bit as well. But for the most part, they're not really pursuing a lot of things unless there's a statute of limitation issue for them. But again, you can refer to that other episode. We also had, let's see if there's anything else in that off the top of my head. I can't see anything else that relates to that specifically for kind of that phase one-ish. The phase two was the paid leave for and credits and so forth. It was the, where's the act? As the, I can go back over here. Apologize. It was referred to as the Family's First Coronavirus Response Act. And it basically provided a couple different credits. It's paid leave for about a 2-week period for employees. Self-employed can apply for it as well. We're going to talk mainly about the employee version first, and you can get it under the paid sick leave or the paid family leave. And that has differing implications, and there are definitely different computations and credit basis for this. The first thing you need to understand is there are specific conditions by which one can is affected, the employee specifically. So if an employee is not able to work because of federal, state, or local quarantine or isolation order, that's one of two classes. So it puts it in a kind of that top tier class there. And then you have a health provider has said, or healthcare provider has said, this employee needs to be quarantined. Maybe they've been exposed for travel reasons or whatever, somehow how they've been exposed to it, but maybe don't have symptoms. They need to be quarantined. And then you have employees experiencing symptoms, and they're trying to seek medical treatment, maybe testing or otherwise. And then you have also where people are caring for people in that first three categories, or are caring for sons or daughters, is what I understand. The guidance here says child. So that doesn't, it's a little broader than son or daughter, but it says child of the employee whose school or place of daycare is closed due to quarantine or other issues, due to the COVID-19 issues. It doesn't say aging parent, doesn't say dependent, so child is a little bit different. And then there's a broad thing where the agencies can come in and reinterpret other substantially similar conditions that could allow for that qualification. Now the first three on the paid, there's two types of leave you can collect. There's the paid leave, and there's the paid family, or the paid sick leave and the paid family leave. The paid sick leave is usually 80 hours, and if you fall in the first three criteria, the employer gets a credit for roughly $511 up to I think $5,000 per person if I'm not mistaken, 5,110 in aggregate for 511 a day, up to $5,110 for the first three criteria. The second three, it's gone down to roughly $200 per day, $2,000 in aggregate per person, and that becomes a determining criteria how much credit the employer will get. And so what I'm going to get to is there needs to be some substantiation. You need to start taking record-keeping efforts. In fact, in this very guidance, I'm referring to the IRS says employers must maintain the records to support their credits they're claiming. So if there's been a state, county, city, stay-at-home order, is the employee living there? Is the office located there? Are they in two separate locations? That can have, some employees may be impacted because they lived in a stay-at-home order area, but the office they went to work at was not. So you can have a lot of those things. Are you an essential business owner or business that needs that? All that kind of thing goes into it. So you need to document those things. If someone has a more individual situation, such as they've been exposed and they went to a healthcare provider, a note from the healthcare provider, or a note that they've been or trying to seek testing, or some documentation of symptoms, that kind of thing. If the school's been closed, can you get a school closing order, or copy that down from the school website? Some kind of documentation and showing that kid attends that school from the employee to classify them as part of that credit. And the reason I say this sounds like, oh, I have to do all that? Yeah. The audit of this will come a year or two later, potentially, when all the fervor and stuff has died down. We're now in a reinterpretation, a hindsight 2020 look back. And people are not going to have the same emotional investment in this process at that point in time, and there will be a lot greater scrutiny. So it's better to do this now when it's easily available to go print broad orders, addresses of people, schools of people, all that kind of stuff. And that makes it a whole lot easier. Even if it's like state ordered stuff, like if you're in a state where it's broad, all schools are closed, that's easy. So that's more likely a lot of the easier stuff to do. So anyways, that's the breakdown for the paid leave, and it's for 2 weeks, 10 days, 80 hours. The paid family leave credit is basically the same thing at $200 a day for $10,000. And I'm very much just broad brushstroking this. There's a lot more detail to get into, but that would be a 10-week process that someone would claim under that. And so those two things result in a credit on your payroll. And this is where it gets kind of odd, is you're really not going to be applied as a business owner for those credits until the second quarter. So this first quarter, it looks like your payroll returns will process normally, and you will not get those credits until second quarter. And it seems kind of odd because they're saying you don't have to remit those funds in certain situations, but it doesn't tell you how to prepare the 941 for Q1 that I'm seeing that outlays the fact that you're going to get the credit somehow in Q2. But that's what they're saying is they'll be applied for in the second quarter payroll. And if there's an advance credit, there's a form 7200 you'll fill out and submit in Q2, as I'm seeing it as well. So this is where high level and meeting the ground level implementation seems to disconnect in my mind. So that to me gives me a concern that you're going to apply for it in one quarter to apply backward in the second quarter. And this is where I think a tax professional would really be well advised to be involved to make sure that credits are being applied, that all things are being applied out. Your payroll processing company may not do this. They may help you record keep to some extent and advise, but if there's an underpayment of tax, they typically don't bother with it. It's your job to go fix, and that's just their role. I'm not saying they're being remissful. It's just the role that you paid them for. So you may need your tax advisor to step in and say, you know what, I need to go look at these accounts on a regular basis and get ahead that the numbers are being properly adjusted as need be based upon the compliance the program allows you to follow. And that's where that advisor can step in. Powers of attorney can be processed and give them visibility to watch those things and track it. So these are the credits. It's the application or filing of those credits that gets me very concerned. The record keeping needed, and have all those I's dotted and T's crossed. And then again, as always, is this worth the squeeze for you? I don't know. You got 2 or 3 employees, it may not be. You got more, it may be at some point. You have to figure that out. But there is going to be some effort, and this is not something you can do at the last minute. You're going to have to do it now and get ahead of it now and get caught up. So in the end, that's kind of the wrap up of the phase 2. Now, as far as self-employed, let's take that. Going back to the self-employed portion of this, where Self-employed get the same credit of sorts. My, my guess is the way this is implemented is you're not going to make the same estimated payment for, your first quarter one. By the way, the second quarter, haven't heard that the June one is got any kind of delay. So in essence, you may still have to make a June payment to some extent, but your April one is deferred till July 15th. But my guess is on the 1040, that's when we all kind of reconcile any self-employed tax there, and that's where that credit may apply is on a 1040. I'm guessing. I don't know that the 7,200 is going to apply for self-employed. My guess is no. It doesn't make sense to me. I haven't looked at it in great detail, but you're looking at probably a 1040 when you file your 2020 return is when that credit will be recognized in some fashion or addressed in some fashion. You're just not paying in your estimated taxes accordingly, so you're getting access to the cash then by not paying it, and you'll get your credit, I guess, on the 1040. That in a nutshell kind of wraps it up to some extent for the phase 2 coronavirus benefits or efforts. And so we'll kind of wrap this up and move to the next level, which is the CARES Act.